So I'm very happy to be here today with Miguel Grinberg, the author of the Flask Mega-Tutorial. I think one of the coolest tutorials out there in the Flask ecosystem, and I'd venture to say beyond in the Python ecosystem and just for programming in general, a really cool resource that I've been a follower for many years. So Miguel, welcome to the interview with Python Ireland.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Not at all. Where are you from, Miguel, and where are you living these days?
So I am from Argentina, and I actually lived. This is probably unusual, I guess. I lived in three different continents throughout my life.
Wow.
So my childhood I spent in Argentina, all the way through college. Then I moved to the United States. I lived in the States for about 20 years, and then when I had enough of the States, I decided to try Europe, and I am now right here in Ireland, and I've been here for 6, going to 7 years now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I remember when I looked you up and you're up in Drogheda, is it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and I was very pleased. The author of the Flask tutorial was so close by. And obviously you're a committee member in Python Ireland and, involved in what we're doing here in Ireland. So it's great. Um, so I mean, I guess let's just get right into it. So I think the first question I have is, I suppose taking you back to, was it 2012 when you first kind of got into
Yeah,
Flask?
yeah,
Yeah.
2012, right?
Yeah. So what
13
made you
years ago.
what made you pick up Flask in particular at that time rather than something else?
Yeah, so at the time, I already decided that I liked Python very much. I was coming from a C++ background, and at work at the time, we needed to make our C++ code more easier to use, and we were using Python as a wrapper library. So when the idea came that I should start blogging, like many people in those years, right? We all wanted to blog, and I had sort of a friendly competition with my wife about this. She started blogging before me, and she was doing well, so I wanted to do it as well. And instead of just picking a blog software, because I am a do-it-yourselfer, I decided to write blog software myself
Mhm.
to then use it to blog. And I started doing a research of all the frameworks that were available. And the three, so there was actually only one that was major, and that was Django, obviously. And I didn't find it very interesting because of all the complexity. The learning curve was steep.
Mhm.
And then there were a bunch of sort of fringe minor frameworks, and the two that I noticed more were Flask and Bottle. And I tried them both, and Flask seemed a little bit more, the ecosystem around it seemed a little bit more active than for Bottle.
Sure.
And but basically that decided it. So I wrote, it probably took me, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I wrote a blog, which is actually, if you go to blog.miguelgreenberg.com, it's been renovated many times, but that's the blog that I wrote 13 years ago,
Mhm.
right? So I now had an empty blog and needed to decide what to write about.
Mhm.
And the only idea that came to me is maybe I should write about writing Flask applications, which is what I just did, right, with the blog
Sure.
itself. Uh, so that was the idea, right? And then that's how it started. And I wasn't an expert in Flask, but by any means, or Python at the time, right? I had very little experience actually. But I decided to start writing about it and see what happened.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting. Like maybe that's better in some way that you were learning, like it was fresh, the experience was fresh and you were able to, relay that to people in an effective way.
Yeah, and also, as I said, Flask was not in the minds of most Python engineers at the time, right? It was a minor
Yeah.
package,
Yeah.
right? It didn't have so just to give you context, I believe the
Mhm.
version that I've used at the time, right? If the first Flask version that I picked up was 0.6, I believe,
Okay.
point 0.6 or zero point 0.7,
Yeah.
right?
Not a
So
long way down.
it was, and it was different than what it is today, right? It had a lot less things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
so
Great timing. So you kind of
it
went
was a great
between.
timing. And if I had chosen, had I chosen Django, writing about Django would not have been very successful because there was a lot of people writing about Django even 13 years ago. But Flask, nobody was doing it, right? So
Yeah, you're there at the beginning.
yeah,
Great chance to influence what's going on.
exactly.
So how have you kind of found that journey writing and teaching about Flask the last like kind of 13 years or so?
Yeah, it's actually writing to with the intention to teach, but indirectly that's also what allowed me to learn, Flask
Mhm.
fully, right? Because as I said, I wasn't an expert, in any definition of that word, right? I just had software development, generic software development experience from my C and C++ years, a little bit of Python, right? And common sense, right?
Mhm.
And the fact that I put this out, for people to use, allowed me to learn a lot of things that I didn't know. And
Yeah.
the tutorial took me, so there were 18 chapters that I wrote, and it took me, I think, about a year, a little bit over a year to write all those chapters, starting in 2012. So it went into 2013,
Yeah.
and I I didn't have a very strict plan. So, for example, I remember there were already, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 chapters, published.
Mhm.
And at work, we needed to do a project using a web project, and we needed to find a good library, for UI, CSS library. And someone, not me, came out with something that was called at the time Twitter Bootstrap. Right, today it's called Bootstrap. They dropped the Twitter name, but came from Twitter, and the name was Twitter Bootstrap at the
Yeah.
time. And someone came out with it, and I thought, oh, that was very cool. And then I decided, okay, the next chapter is going to be about applying, a facelift to this application that I was building, and just make it look nicer. And many things, came that way. It was completely improvised.
Mm.
And at some point when I reached 18 chapters, it felt that it was good to end it there.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. The kind of move to full stack or having like a front end as part of Flask. Like that's something that's always been very attractive to me, to a single repo. And as a Python developer, to be able to actually, see the results of your work and at least like do a draft or, some kind of reasonable front end. Um, and can I ask, have you ever ventured into the dark side, into the kind of JavaScript React side of things as well?
Oh, I have done that. Yeah, and yeah, I don't think I'll be able to come out of that hole.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, maybe you don't know this. There's also a React Mega-Tutorial. That's one of the ways that the work that I did, the early work that I did, then derived into other things. And I actually written, in the same style, I did a tutorial for React, which is actually the main framework that I use when I have to do front ends.
Oh, that's fantastic. I actually didn't know that. And I'm actually doing a
Yeah.
bit of React at the moment. So I'm definitely going to check
Well, there
that
you go. Yeah, and
out.
like the mega tutorial, both tutorials are freely available on the blog, on my blog. Or
Fantastic.
if you want to support me, you can also buy the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen the book, web application book is out as well. So fantastic.
Right.
And then it's okay. So you're basically covering the full stack for anyone who wants to really go full stack, which has, I think, become quite a trend in the last few years. I've seen that.
It is, and Flask is positioned well. Not only Flask these days. Flask is not the only one, right? Let's recognize FastAPI, for example, is also
Yeah.
in the same category. But it's actually a good fit for these lightweight frameworks where the backend, it's dedicated to maintaining the storage, your database, and then everything else you do it in JavaScript in the front end. If you are not allergic to JavaScript, like many people are, right? If you're not, then it's good, because I believe React is a really good framework to
Sure.
do your front ends. If you are allergic to JavaScript, it's something that I fully respect. At some point, I was,
Yeah.
right, and there are also options for those who really prefer not to touch JavaScript, or to touch it the least.
Yeah.
You also have options.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Sure. You can stick with Flask and Bootstrap and just continue.
so you can use the what I show in the Flask
Yeah.
Mega-Tutorial, which is backend centric.
Yeah.
There are newer options. There's HTMX is a framework that a lot of people are using. I have also implemented an extension for Flask to allow you to use Turbo.js, which is it's somewhat similar to HTMX. It's
Right.
slightly different, but it covers the same need, which is to implement front ends without writing JavaScript.
Fantastic. So
So,
there's many ways up the mountain for people.
yeah, there's basically options for everyone,
Fantastic.
which is
Okay. And you can
like
even you can even stick in the Grinberg universe and go with, Flask Mega-Tutorial, React Mega-Tutorial. Like that'll be a really nice, well-rounded kind of uh, skill set at the end of it.
right. It follows my own my own learning path as well, right? Uh,
Yeah.
it's basically I always say so. This is funny. People ask me, why don't you write a mega tutorial for FastAPI or for Django or for whatever else? And I just write about what I use, and that's what works, right? I don't see this as a job, right? And I
Yeah.
have a day job anyway.
Yeah.
So this is on the side, and I do it for fun. And yeah, I only, it's basically, you can take it as a recommendation. If I wrote about it, it's that I think that it's something that I recommend,
That's cool. Yeah.
right?
It
And
gives a lot of authenticity to it.
if I didn't, I'm not saying that I do not recommend. I'm just saying that I don't know. I don't know. Right? It might
Yeah.
be good, but I never had a chance to work on that.
Yeah. Leave it for someone else.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Why
Someone else can make
everything needs to be
plastic.
done by me? Exactly.
Plastic mega tutorial can come. You can't write every mega tutorial. You have to
Right.
choose your battles. Um, no, I think that kind of brings me on to an interesting point that you raised. I suppose the last 10 years, the whole, kind of microservice idea and light web app idea has become much more prevalent. And we have Fast API now. Django is still going strong. Where do you kind of see, Flask, Django, Fast API, and the other? Are they kind of competing for the same mind space, or maybe Flask has its own niche, or how does it work?
So I see. I think there is a little bit of a competition. Um, I mean, I'm not going to deny that. Clearly Fast API is rising, right? And Django and Flask are now, if you look at surveys, the usage, the market share seems to be going, more towards Fast API and dropping on the side of the older frameworks, Django and Flask, right? Other frameworks are all, very, very minor, like Model, for example, which I thought, back in 2012, I thought it was quite nice, even though it didn't have a big community. Bottle still exists. There are others that exist, but they have a very, very small market share. So yeah, they do compete. Django with its batteries included approach is going to work more for the enterprisey developers, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
right? Where basically you don't want to start looking for solutions. You just want something that's proven, that works, and that's Django. Django
Yeah.
works really well in that area. Uh,
Yeah.
Flask, I see it as, for the people who do want to make selections. If you want to use your own database libraries, you want to use your own authentication solution,
Yeah.
and so on, then Flask is great. Fast API is strong in the same areas, except that it works asynchronously. So now you have basically the two leaders in the async or sync sides.
Yeah.
And so so today, if I need to start a new project, if I have to write, uh, standard Python, then I would use Flask. If I
Yeah,
need to do it asynchronously, I would use FastAPI.
yeah,
Uh,
great.
yeah,
It's fun. Yeah,
save other things that maybe I'll tell you later. I have my own web framework right now as well, which is one of the minority ones with a
it's,
very specific need, right? But if I have to go with the major options, those are the options. I will and I will be unlikely to use Django myself because that's not, I want to make choices. I want
yeah,
to select my dependencies. So Django does not work for me, but FastAPI does, and Flask does as well.
it's great. I mean, it sounds like the ecosystem is just getting richer, more diverse, and
Yeah,
we
I
can
think
appreciate
in
it.
the end, everybody wins.
Everyone's
And
up there.
one thing that I really like is the people who use FastAPI who learned it by following the Flask Mega-Tutorial, because they're
Mhm.
actually very similar, right? They're not not very much different,
That's cool.
right? So the Flask Mega-Tutorial touches on a lot of topics that are not specific to Flask.
Very good.
And for example,
Yeah,
I make
yeah,
big use of SQL Alchemy, which a lot of people also use with FastAPI,
yes,
right? So anyway, I use Elasticsearch, for example,
yes,
which is completely
yeah,
agnostic of the framework,
yes,
and many other things, right? So
yes.
all the JavaScript related content, there's a little bit of JavaScript in the Flask Mega-Tutorial
Yeah,
that translates to anything else, right? So it really makes me very happy when I learn of a, someone who learned uh, Fast API or anything non-Flask using my tutorial.
that's fantastic. Yeah, actually, that was my experience. I think, and of my colleagues, that I think we kind of learned about how to put together APIs pretty much from the Flask mega tutorial. The theory, I suppose, of RESTful APIs, and also around SQL alchemy, things like migration and stuff like that. Those concepts.
Right,
Um,
those are more or less universal,
are
and then
universal. Yeah,
translate to
mm,
every other framework that you use in the future. Right.
fantastic. Okay, so another question then, I suppose, the audience, like maybe for Flask and also for your tutorial over the last, 12, 13 years, have you seen the audience change at all? Or is it the same kind of crowd? Is it software engineers, kind of creating enterprise applications, or I don't know, any changes you've seen? Like, I mean, I suppose
Uh,
the rise of data science and lots of different things that have,
right. Well, definitely, you cannot ignore the data science crowd, which
right.
was I didn't have any visibility into that side of Python 13 years ago, right? And they really grew in a really big way.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, one aside from that, one interesting thing that I noticed is that in the beginning, I always had to demonstrate that Flask was good enough for people. A very common question, the most common question I received was, "Can I do a big project with Flask?"
yeah,
Right? People assumed it was a toy framework. It was tiring to have to defend Flask, which
yeah,
isn't even my project, right?
yeah.
I was just a developer using it, right? But people had serious concerns, and I'm happy to say that in the last 5 years or so, that went away, right? Nobody doubts that
Mm,
Flask is up to the task, right? Whatever the task might be,
that's
right?
cool.
So I'm really
Mm,
happy to have seen that transition
yes.
from a fringe framework that seemed like maybe a toy to to be considered seriously.
Yes. Production ready, plenty of big enterprise
Right.
examples.
I mean, today nobody will doubt.
No,
If you say I use Flask, you're considered to be, to know what you're doing, right? So
that's it. That's it. And actually that brings me on to the question of scale, I suppose, quite nicely. So I have a few questions from Harshal Chowdhury, who I worked with in the past, who's done a lot more Flask than me. So he was anxious
mhm.
to get a few questions in. And so what he asked is, and I think he's looking for free consultancy here, Miguel, because he said, if you were tasked to scale a Flask application from like 10 users up to 10 million daily active users, right? Something, you know,
Yeah.
humongous. What would be some of the key areas of the application that you'd be looking to optimize to kind of really handle scale.
Right. So hopefully this is written in a style of an API, not in the style of So let's think about the two main ways to design a Flask application, right? You can write a web application, right, where
Yeah.
everything is done in the server, right? This is the Flask Mega-Tutorial. Most of it covers this style, except towards the end where it goes into the other side.
Yeah.
The other side being where you write your backend, dedicated mostly to do storage. You write an API, we call it an API, and then there's some other component, usually a front end written in JavaScript, that creates the application logic. It's a lot easier to scale if you do the latter, right? If you create an API, right? An API, it's very lightweight, and let's say you create your API, and then through testing, you find out that you can serve, I don't know, let's say 1,000 users per second.
Yeah.
I don't know, let's say, right? So your solution, if you need to serve 2,000 users, then you run two. You run two instances. Or if you were running n instances and you can do 1,000 users, then n times 2 will give you roughly twice that many,
Yeah.
right?
And you
And
have
it scales linearly, right? So
your load balance.
then it becomes a matter of money and not a matter of technical issues,
Yeah.
right? And in my view, if you're a company, you want to be in that position where the only limit to your scaling is it's money. You just need to buy more infrastructure.
Yeah. So
Right.
you follow that API paradigm with Flask.
Right.
The sky's the limit then on what you
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if so there are other things. There are things that may become bottlenecks. So sometimes your databases are, especially the relational databases, the ones that you use with SQL Alchemy,
Yeah.
are very hard to scale. The databases are hard to scale, by the way they work, right?
Sure.
So you're going to find that Postgres, MySQL, SQLite is of course, really difficult to scale. But Postgres and MySQL, even though they are web services or services, they're very hard to scale. Yeah, you can create clusters, but they're difficult to do sharding. So basically, you need to have the whole database in one process, and then you can create replicas
Yeah.
that allow you to read more efficiently, because you can read from a replica instead of sending all the requests to the master. So you do the master concentrates on the writes, and then you have one or more replicas for the reads.
Sure.
All those things, eventually you hit a limit.
Yeah.
So this is the part that's very difficult, and that may be a bottleneck that is technical in nature, that cannot be solved with money.
Sure.
Right? So in that case, you have to start looking at caching, and sometimes what I've done sometimes when not even caching helps is basically implement your own solution for sharding. So instead of relying on the database, which cannot do this in a good way for relational databases, at least, you create two databases or three databases, and you do the separation, right? You divide,
Gotcha.
your content, and now you can start to scale. If your application domain allows you to create a division that way.
Gotcha. And this, I suppose, coming out of I kind of come out of the data engineering, kind of data science world more. So I'm just curious, and this could be an ignorant question, but like when it gets into like some of the big data solutions like Spark or any of those things, are they useful for to kind of get to this kind of level of scale for for back end for web application and in this kind of situation that we're talking about, or are they more kind of offline?
Right. So probably not the best person to answer with experience, because I don't really have a lot of experience, but I do see them more as so many storage systems have different categories of storage that needs to be available,
Sure.
readily available,
Yeah.
and then storage that is there, but it's slower, takes more time to get to it. So you basically you move things depending on, so basically the faster layer, it's closer to what a cache would be, and then you have other layers that are
Yeah. Yeah.
cheaper and slower.
Yeah.
So
Cheaper
I
and slower.
see
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So I see those as that where content that is unlikely to be needed, and content that if it takes a little bit more to retrieve, it is okay. Then those are great, uh,
Yeah.
right?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I think from what you're saying, there's no free lunch here. You have to really think through
I
your
don't think there
solution
is, right?
for
Exactly.
scale,
Yeah,
access at scale like that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And I suppose just um we couldn't really talk about Python or anything to do with programming these days without touching on AI in some way.
No,
Possible, right?
no, right.
So okay, so AI, I suppose the first question for you is, do you find yourself using AI yourself, Miguel, in your development workflow or writing workflow? How do you tend-
Yeah. So so GitHub, it's nice to give me a free subscription to GitHub Copilot. Right. I don't think I will pay for it, right? But since they and this is something that they do with people who are active on open source, right? They actually they don't give you a way to say no, right? They just give you the free subscription
yeah.
to GitHub Copilot, right? So because I got it for free, I said, okay, I'm just gonna put it there and see what it does, right? So many times I compare what I write with what GitHub Copilot suggests.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not great.
Okay.
For any kind of professional work, it's not great.
Okay.
So now, we're all seeing people who do vibe coding. Uh, I
Yeah.
mean, that's great, right? If you come from the bottom, right, and if you don't know something and you're going to do something, that doesn't have to be robust, the AI will be great, right? You're likely to get some results that you would not be able to achieve yourself unless you spend a lot of time learning, right?
Yeah.
Great for that. Coming from the other side, right, where you're experienced, I don't really see a lot of value because the code that so think about this. It was trained on all the code on GitHub, right? And
Yeah.
right, without regards of being good code, bad code, it's just code, right? So the chances that you're going to get really good code that will be equal to what you will write are really slim. And
Right.
every time I look at a suggestion that GitHub Compiler offers, I feel that I can do better. And given that when I'm working on code, this is code that I'm going to have to maintain. It's not throwaway code, right?
Yeah.
So the vibe coders can write throwaway code and get results, and then they forget about it, and that seems reasonable for that. But in my case, this is code that I'm going to have to maintain. So
Yes.
I don't really see at least today's uh, you know today's models. They're
Mhm.
not able to provide good support for
Mhm.
for a person like me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
There's also this is something that I read many times. People say that uh, that a coding AI, it's like you get an intern that is very happy to to help you. That's great, but this is an intern that has short-term memory loss, right? Because every time you open the chat to talk to this AI, it doesn't remember anything. It doesn't learn anything, right? I
Yeah.
really
No.
want a human intern that I can train,
Yeah. I
and
get
you
better.
know it gets better, right? Give me that. Give me an AI that learns. Maybe I look at it. But these this crop of stupid AIs that don't have memory. I Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some use for them, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to uh, to be completely negative. It
Sure.
doesn't provide good use to me, at
That's
least.
interesting. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've seen some of the results of vibe coding over the last couple of years, or some colleagues of mine. certainly one colleague of mine has seen some disasters and that has been brought
Oh,
in from
they're
people
awful.
below.
Yeah, I mean,
So
so and this is something interesting. This is not something this is not a thought that came from me, but I read somewhere, and I think what we are going to need going forward is we're going to need to be very good at code reviewing, which is
yeah,
something that we are not. Many people they're not used to review code. In the same way that now when we look at a picture on Twitter or whatever, if it's too good to be true, we say, yeah, this, we all were programmed to distrust pictures, right?
yeah,
Because of
yeah,
the AI, right?
yeah.
So the same thing is going to have to happen with code. You cannot take code that comes from an unknown source and assume because it works that it's good and that you will be able to maintain it, right? You really have to do a good review,
That's a very good point. I mean, people often do say that it's harder to read code than to write code sometimes.
right?
It's a skill what
I mean, it
we're gonna have to
takes a
learn.
lot of skill, and
Yeah. That's really interesting. And
it's something that people need to be aware of going
yeah,
forward.
very much so. Well, I guess perhaps, anyone who gets into coding now through vibe coding and they find the limits, maybe they'll find their way to the Flask Mega-Tutorial, other resources, and start to
Yeah,
go a bit deeper and learn the craft themselves, which
right. Which you
anyway,
are going to need if you need to review code, even if you end up using
sure,
AI as a helper. You're
sure.
going to have to make sure that the code that the AI is giving you, at least if you get paid to do the work, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
If you're doing this for work professionally, I don't see how you can blindly trust AI, right? You're going to have to learn and understand. So basically, you will need to be able to write what you're asking the AI to write for you, and maybe the AI, with time, eventually the AI will be able to do it faster than you. That's possible, right? So it may be good. I may end up at some point decide I may decide that it works for me as well in that capacity, but it definitely needs to be something that I intended to write in the first place. If I'm going to be on the hook to maintain that code and be responsible for it.
yeah. It sounds like we're gonna need people with mastery to, yes, just to at
Yeah,
least supervise what's going on in this space. Like,
right.
okay, fantastic. Just on a completely different note, just I guess it's a quick question on your interest in MicroPython because I just saw a reference to it in your bio.
Yeah.
Um, I just wonder what
So
you use it for. And
yeah. So this is funny. So I moved to Ireland 6 or 7 years ago, and the house that I rented had probably a lot of people would recognize this, a climate, right? Which is something that in the States does not exist. This is an Irish company, I believe, that produces these smart heating controls, right? That basically you control your heating with an app, right? And so this house had one of those, and the thermostats that were used were very inaccurate. So the house was cold most of the time,
mm,
but it was not a linear difference with the actual temperature that you can adjust. It was like you know it was unpredictable. I couldn't find a way to configure it to keep the house at the level, at the temperature level that I wanted. So this thing has an API. So I said, yeah, okay, maybe I'll investigate what can I do to improve this. Yeah, there's a YouTube video about this, by the way, this project.
oh,
So if
fantastic.
you look
Okay,
on my YouTube, you'll find it.
yeah, we'll
Uh,
link to that in the. I'll have a look
yeah,
there.
I'll send you
Great.
the link if you can find it. But anyway, I found MicroPython, right? And then you can write a little application that connects that runs in a microcontroller. So that this is a very tiny computer, or less than a computer. It's a computer without an OS, right? It just runs your code.
Mm,
So typically you write code in C or C++ for
mm,
these devices, but MicroPython now allows us to write Python, uh, and you can attach a thermometer to the device, right? So you get this microcontroller board
Great.
connect it with a thermometer, right? These are all things that you can buy for really cheap, right? There's cheap components that you buy, and it's very easy to connect them. You don't need to have hardware knowledge
Mhm.
beyond the basics. So then you can write Python code that gets you the temperature in the room that you are, right? So
Sounds really cool. I think so just we're gonna have you in next week in Python Ireland to talk about the Flask Mega-Tutorial and the new version from 2024. I suspect there could be room for another get you in and talking about MicroPython at some stage.
we should definitely do on MicroPython.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Uh,
that's a topic that I enjoy a lot. I do a lot of work on MicroPython these days.
Fantastic. And yeah, and I think a lot of people are getting interested in this space. The whole maker movement is growing in Ireland the last few number of years. So yeah, like I think it'd be really cool to hear, about that in
Yeah,
more
and
detail.
in addition, I have an accepted talk for EuroPython in Prague
Yeah.
this July, and that's also MicroPython related.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that sounds really good. So, Miguel, just to bring it back to the kind of the main topic, which is the Flask Mega Tutorial, you did a full-scale revision in 2024. So, what are kind of the improvements and the goodies that users of the tutorial can?
Yeah, the main driver for that revision was the Flask 3.0 release. So I started from the goal of making the tutorial fully compatible with Flask 3.0. And there was another major thing that this revision includes, which is support for, we spoke before about using Bootstrap as a UI library, and all the previous revisions used a very old version of Bootstrap. So the 2024 revision upgrades Bootstrap to 5.3, which is, I believe, still the current the current release. So those are the main two. Uh, Actually, there's a third one now that I remember, which is the upgrade to SQL Alchemy 2. That's another
Ah,
big
great.
one.
Okay. Yeah.
SQL Alchemy went through a major, really major change between the 1.x's and the 2.0. And this tutorial, the 2024 edition, is fully compliant with the SQL Alchemy 2 release, which uses type hints, for example. This is one thing that for a long time people wanted. They wanted SQL Alchemy to allow you to define your models, your database models, using Python type hints. And
Mm.
this version has that. And this is included in this revision.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I must go back to it, and I'd advise anyone listening to have a look. And of course, you have the book as well. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the book for anyone who wants to
Yeah, so
learn about
actually
the book?
I did I believe I touched on this at some point. So this was born as a blog series, but at some point I decided to package the tutorial, which is actually the same content. So if you don't have money, you don't want to pay for the book, you get the exact same content on the blog. But if you prefer to have it in book format, there's a book. I initially self-published it both as Kindle or paperback, so all Amazon in the Amazon
Right. Yeah.
ecosystem. And for many years, people complain about the DRM, which I agree. I agree with those complaints. And my excuse was that I need to find a platform that allows me to publish the book easily, that doesn't take a lot of time,
Sure.
that I don't have to have to babysit. And
Yeah.
this year, actually, in 2025, finally that came about, and now the book is also published by the Pragmatic Bookshelf,
Right.
which provides the ebook in DRM-free formats. If you're interested, if you're using any readers that are not Kindle, then you can get it and use it that way.
Fantastic. Yeah, you can't beat a book sometimes. I think that's a really nice to have that option. Um, and then just like, you're talking about your, obviously you've done a huge amount for the open source community around Python and Flask. How would you advise people, would you kind of, how would you kind of sell people on getting involved in Python Ireland, getting involved in open source projects? So what do you think the benefits are for people to do something like that?
Yeah. So, so the probably one easy thing. I mean, you probably know more about this than me, but you and I both are involved with the Python Ireland organization, and this organization has a number of projects that would like to accomplish, and right, and
Yeah,
I usually lend my time occasionally to review, to help as a reviewer. Uh, and anybody interested, they can reach out. And this is going to help with the organization of PyCon Ireland, for example, right? Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and the list of projects are basically, I have to say that they're very interesting. And I mean, I will do some of those myself, but you have to let other people do the work, right? And I
Yeah.
basically happy doing reviews and making sure that everything, mentoring, whatever it takes, I
Fantastic.
mean, for the people who actually do the contributions.
Amazing.
But
Yeah. Amazing opportunity for people just to get that experience and to have like, really, really good experienced coders reviewing and
and these are actually real projects that
yeah,
that are
yeah,
going to be used,
yeah,
right?
that's
This
it.
isn't you doing something that then nobody will use. This is going to be used immediately. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I think we'll have more details of those projects on the website and at the meetups, over the next few months. But there's no harm in reaching out straight away if anyone wants to get started on a project. We've plenty of work for people to do and
right.
experienced Pythonistas like Miguel there, to support and mentor. So why not? Amazing opportunity. And then I suppose the final thing is, Miguel, you're going to be with us in Workday for our monthly meetup next week, April the 9th, I want to say, on
The
Wednesday.
ninth,
Yeah,
I believe.
9th,
Yeah.
Wednesday, April 9th in Workday in Dublin. And what are you going to be talking about, Miguel, at that?
So this presentation is going to be centered around the Flask Mega-Tutorial. I'm going to touch a little bit on the history, but I hope the message that I'm going to try to uh, basically to share is that everybody should write about something they feel passionate about, some project that they do, because that not only helps the people who then find your content, but it helps you as well, right? Everything then grows. I started doing this with basically no, I wasn't known in the Python ecosystem at all, right? I was, complete unknown. And, a lot of things happened to me professionally, just because I decided to write on my blog. So it's really, it takes little effort. Or maybe I should be honest. At the beginning, it's difficult to write. You feel like you're not good, and
Sure. Yeah,
in most cases, it's really you that have an unrealistic, appreciation of yourself.
sure,
There's a level of imposter syndrome there.
sure.
Uh, so you should push through that and keep doing it, and eventually, I promise you, it gets easier, and and then you're going to see the rewards, right? You're going to learn more about what you write, and even though in the beginning you're not going to be an expert, and nobody expects you to be an expert about what you write, eventually you will be going towards that, right? You will become an expert in the matters that you write about.
Yeah. That's a great way to end the interview, I think, with that advice, Miguel. Fantastic stuff. So just thank you again for talking with us today and
Yeah,
Python
thank you
Ireland.
for having me.
No problem at all. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you next week in person
Yep.
in Workday.